It's absolutely, well, maybe not absolutely, but it's almost no fun videoing as opposed to Facebook Live. But whilst my phone says that it has 4G and even 5G signal right now in here, much to my surprise, because I had troubles in these woods about a week or so ago in terms of getting a signal for Facebook Live. The Facebook app does not have the option of going live on it, and it seems to be taking a while to download the junk that it wants to display to me, as well as, you know, content from my friends and so on. So here I am in the woods videoing this, and I think, as well as talking to no one at this point in time, the other reason why just videoing, well, yeah, get a better signal, get a better quality images and stuff, but there's also the lack of surprise from me as well. In other words, when somebody joins, or even the thought of somebody joining, you don't know who it's going to be, and even if they've joined before, it's like, it's still, there's a sense of surprise or delight when they join. And the one thing I know about doing this video is that no one's going to join, and possibly no one will ever watch it. So the idea that not just as I'm doing it am I talking to myself, but also the possibility that even down in the midst of time, some distant future, I look back and think, yep, that never changed. Nobody looked at it, nobody saw it, nobody commented on it, it didn't do anything for anyone, so why am I doing it? And that's the thing, they are taken, these lives are done to do something for someone or something, and hopefully many someones and many somethings. So whoever watches it, whoever joins as a connection, whoever watches it, that's nice, and hopefully also an opportunity to do justice to where I am, which in this case is, I don't know what particular woods you call it, but it's the back end of Ruislip Lido in Northwood. The sound of the cars in the background is probably Ducks Hill Road. I'm probably going to go right at some point and drop down and come out of one of the alleys by the houses. And from there I may be able to do a live, but then you're into residential suburbia and it's just not quite the same amount of fun, although I do love the properties in the area around here, but I'm just not really one for broadcasting people's properties live, because I think it just opens the door up. You know, it's not a good look to be a guy just walking around on your own videoing multi-million pound properties. I mean, yes, I have the right to do it, but I'm not out having a walk to rub my rights into the nose of someone with the same rights. I'm just, you know, when I go out for a walk, it's because I just want to get some space, a little bit of exercise, a little bit of motion. Bodies like that, don't they? Being used and everything. And hopefully have a little rambling that is interesting, maybe point out a few things of interest. But yeah, I would love to film on my walks. I would love to film the properties that surround me, because very often when I go for these walks, they're in nice areas. Cobweb. I was wondering whether or not to break the little thing that the spider had made or duck under it. But yeah, I would love to do that. I'd love to make those recordings, but I'm just not comfortable with doing it. And I know many people, or some people may say to me, you know, just do it, you know, you have the right, la da 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 da, but it just doesn't feel nice doing it. I'm not relaxed doing it. And then afterwards, if I get into any kind of verbal scrap with someone, it just leaves a bad taste. And every time you go in that location, there's the memory of the fact that you had that, and it's just not worth it. I don't really see what doing that will have achieved. So I have the right to walk, and although I do have the right to video, I mean, apparently my understanding is you are allowed to record anything that your eyes can see. So even if you're looking, I mean, you'd have to question why a person was doing it, but even if you, technically speaking, I guess that would mean if you filmed somebody's garden, you know, if your eyes can see it, then I guess that means you have the right to do that. But there is a saying that does get, well, it's been used against me and a few people in the past when we've tried to get Freedom of Information Act data from our trustee government. On at least one occasion they have refused it on the grounds that it would be vexatious. And I was thinking, I kind of feel like I know where they're coming from, but let's try and get a more accurate idea of what that word means. And if I remember rightly, it basically means, you know, it would be, you'd be targeting someone and trying to rile them, trying to get them going. There'd be no need for that. So I think that was a cop-out on this particular occasion when it happened to us, because what it was when it got passed in, I think it's in law, that government have the right to prowl and view your last 1 year's, in other words, they can demand this from your internet service provider, to view your last 12 months browsing history, even if you've deleted it on your machine. They gave themselves the right, they passed it into law or something, to do that, to say, right, we want to see what you've been looking at on the internet for the last 12 months. So our response to that is, can we see the browsing history of, I can't remember the lady's name, but she was one of the main instigators of putting that, if it is a law, putting it into place. And we decided that under the Freedom of Information Act, that we therefore had the right to see her last 12 months of browsing history. Which I thought was a really great move, since by passing that into the law, they're doing one of two things. They're making an accusation and a determination. You know, we want to be able to do this, and we think there'll be good reason to get that data. And you know, quite often you'll find that they're the least, what would be the word? The least, that's probably a better way of putting it, but the least innocent in that arena. You know, the accuser often accuses people of things that they themselves either have done or seek to do, or something along those lines. Anyway, so we tried to do that. We just thought that would be quite a good idea. It'd be interesting to see what was in that person's reality. And anyway, it was denied upon those grounds that it would be, you know, vexatious to do so. It's like, in other words, we were doing it, we're being vexatious, requesting it. We were doing it to hound the person, or to harass, or in some ways cause discomfort. Well, I suppose all of those things would be the case when you're going after a legitimate target, but I guess what they were trying to say is we also don't feel that it can't see any grounds for this being considered to be a legitimate target for anything other than your own dissatisfaction at her or sense of irony at this person's whatever behaviour, existence, or whatever. Anyway, so wow, this really is muddy. So So basically, anyway, although that is an interesting story, it is another lovely digression, as I am wont to do. And also, talking about digressions, let me also point out that I always start an actual recording rather than a Facebook Live with a moan about the fact that I don't like just doing a recording. And I always consider to myself that although I always seem to just enjoy it once I get going, I won't this time. And I always do. And once again, I'm quite happy now on this, making this video now that I've got going. But I probably will still cut it short in a minute or two. But anyway, so this, getting back on track a little bit more. The idea then in my head, I suppose, is that if I'm walking around the streets filming people's front gardens or whatever, I may have the right to do that. But it's, in my church we'd say it's, could be considered to be generating antagonism or causing antagonism. In other words, getting someone going for no necessarily apparent reason. And there seems to be some sort of, maybe it was arbitrary, maybe it was just a whim of the person who denied this Freedom of Information Act request, but it seems that and you've got to be careful sometimes when a clever word is used that it makes it sound authoritarian or that the person has a right. We could have turned around and said, well, vexatious or not, it doesn't matter, there's no precedent for that in law, etc., blah, blah, blah. I don't know if there is or there isn't, but it gave me the impression that there was such a thing as being vexatious, winding someone up, getting someone going, riling them for no apparent reason. And so that just is in my head. And it's not as if I really need to record it for any other reason just than my own pleasure and perhaps bringing pleasure to others. And then I look and I think at what price, and I think, nah, then it's not worth it. To me, these places, these houses around here are good news, but a lot of the times the people in them behave like it's not. But I'm pretty sure I'd be the same. If I was sitting in my front room and looked out the window and there's a guy walking down filming my front garden, I'd certainly want to know what he was doing, but whether or not I would get off my backside and go out and say something, I'm not sure. And maybe if I didn't, maybe the reason would be that I just didn't want to be confrontational. I think that's probably what it is. I'm just not interested in the sort of confrontation of it when I'm, if it comes, it comes. But I don't like to feel that I've gone looking for it. There's a guy there's a few people kicking around on the internet now that are doing this, but there's a guy, is it Audit the Police or something like that? Audit as in look into, investigate, see how they're doing, how they're getting on with standing up to their duties. And he goes about and he'll film a police car park, a police station car park, and he will then check out the. He'll record live the response to the police, and the truth of the matter is, sometimes I think with what he's saying that it's a little bit. He may be vexing them in some way, but he at least is just trying to see, I suppose, how they respond to their duties. And you think, well, it is a little bit odd that someone would just stand around the back of a police station and put a camera, an iPhone camera or something over their head and view the car park. And I'm actually quite surprised that they can do it, but yeah, they can do it. And the police, one thing I've noticed with these police, some of them really get things wrong. But I can tell you this, those who get it right, the police that respond in the accurate manner, they're really put through their paces, and they actually, there's just not that many of them. I suppose he doesn't post stuff that he doesn't consider noteworthy, but some of them I've seen, I thought, you know what, they stood up really well to that, because the guy was putting them under all kinds of twists and turns and headlocks and stuff. And every so often you get one who manages to stand up to that throughout all of its twists and turns. But some don't do such a great job, and obviously, particularly perhaps in America, some errors in that situation are of the stuff of very sad legend. But one thing I did notice, that most of the things you'll find is that the first thing the police do is approach you in an authoritarian, maybe even a slightly, one of those sort of an aggressive manner, but of the nature that you can't question, but is there. Somebody just intimating a level of aggression against you that you couldn't call out. You couldn't say, hey, you're being aggressive. But they are, and they know etc., etc. But the first thing they're doing, really, I've noticed, is that they're challenging your genuine credentials on not on whether or not you should be there, because they already know that they have no grounds to tell you shouldn't, unless you pull something really dumb. But it's more on they go right up to the edge of what they can do, with almost like a suggestion that they can go further. And what, in this guy's particular case, the guy, don't remember his name, but he has a Facebook page. Maybe I'll share it. I think I have shared it actually. But anyway, what they're testing your level of commitment to your understanding, that ratio of both, the level of your understanding and your commitment to it, of your rights in that situation. In other words, you're waving the camera around, we're going to tell you to go away, as if we can tell you to go away. If you turn around and say, no, you won't, we'll say, yes, you will, and we'll say it with even more authority. But if you turn around and say, you standing on your oath today, officer, so his response is like, what, you mean you actually know what you're talking about? In other words, at that point in time, they know they've kind of like met their match. And I've had this, not so much with the police, I've had this with arguments with people in the past, where at that point they have to change tack without making it too obvious, because if they make it too obvious, they're saying that they shouldn't have been behaving as they were behaving. In other words, they shouldn't have been approached you in such an aggressive manner or something. I had a classic example of this. Your call is recorded for training and monitoring purposes. Well, that's a two-way thing. You can ask for a copy of that. Sometimes a company will charge you a tenner. And maybe very often they won't. But anyway, I had somebody trying to destroy me on the phone, and I wasn't in a great position at that point in time to take it and to deal with it. But I knew what my rights were, and so I said, there's a woman, and I said to her, and she was, by this time, she was working for an organisation. She was completely off the chain by then. She was ripping into me and all kinds of stuff. And I said to her, this call is recorded, isn't it? She went a little bit quiet and said, yes, Mr. Cruz, it is. Why? I said, I just wondered. I said, I'd like to have a copy of it. And she said, well, why is that? I said, I don't think I need to give a reason, do I? And she went, well, no, I just wondered. I said, well, I'd just like a copy, please. So if you could get that in the post to me within 14 days, that would be great. She went, okay. And then she just completely changed her tune, and she went, the thing is, Mr. Cruz, and calmed right down, and we were now having a conversation, which I managed to sort of smooth out and get out of that conversation to recover and fight another day, if you like. But I did get a copy in the post of that conversation on a CD with a password and stuff, and up to this day, because of their conduct, continued to straighten out afterwards, that organisation. I've never had need to open it and listen to it, but the difference in tone, was remarkable. So, but what the person is doing at that point in time, by changing tack so massively, is admitting that they maybe had been choosing the wrong one to begin with. So, anyway, some of the sort of little administrative scrapes that I've been in are not a point for bragging about, to be honest with you, because when you're up against it, you're up against it. It's not. I've never been one really for that, but it was more the point that I was getting mistreated in a situation where I didn't really have much. I wouldn't say much defence, because that's wrong, but I didn't have anybody in my corner. I was just getting steamrolled, and but I did have that, and I knew that I had that, and it was my application of that right, and my conviction that shall be, you know what I mean? To say, this is what's going to happen. What's going to happen is you're going to give me a copy of this conversation, and it completely changed the conversation, and that was needed at the time. So very useful. And this is what, and funny enough, I wouldn't go as far as to say commend, but I could acknowledge, this is the thing, is when you get a change in, like what we call an ethics change, where somebody's off the chain and behaving ridiculously, and by whatever means you manage to get them to snap back in line. If they do and they straighten out, you can't now go off to win that argument. It's just, you've got to do the same. You've got to say, well, look, at the end of the day, they're out of control. By the grace of God, I managed to get them back under control, and they did go back under control. So acknowledge it, tip your hat to it, say, okay, fair play. Let's carry on and get the rest of this situation, sorted out, sort of thing. So, credit where it's due, sort of thing. And in actual fact, I've had a few times where I've had run-ins with people who have gotten really out of shape and have managed to say or do something that's kind of brought them to their senses. And watching somebody go from 100 mile an hour the wrong way to dropping their case, if you like, turn around saying, you know what, yeah, all right, fair play, you've got a point. My respect for someone like that, because even like looking at it as guys, what we're like, for instance, how far past the junction do you go before you turn around? You look at your sat nav, you like recalculate, and it says another 9 miles if you carry on going the way you're going. You think, all right, let's stop, turn around. And there's an old saying, big people can forgive. So that works both ways. Somebody treads on you, won't stop treading on you, and you manage to, one way or the other, get them to knock it off, almost like under their own volition, and they do. You got to take your hat off to it. And that's almost like an act of forgiveness in their part, but you got to do the same. And so in the case of my little run-in with this thing, with getting this a copy of this conversation I was having, the fact that they did since then have been quite, I don't know if amiable was the right word, but they've been quite accurate. Probably it might sound like a weird word, but they've been quite accurate to deal with. In other words, they've acted in a more proper fashion since then, and a bit more humane way, sort of thing. So I haven't mentioned that organisation, but a whole part of the story is the fact that they have behaved in a better manner since, so fair play to them for that. But in the case of this guy who audits the police, if you like, he does get in their face a little bit. Sometimes it's quite funny, but as I say, I've always noticed the thing that happens from the police, the ones that handle the situations not so well, is they always approach in an aggressive, accusative way that suggests they have more rights than they have. And when sometimes it's tacit. Tacit is when something's unspoken, but it's just known. You know, when you look at someone and you just know you're both thinking the same thing. There's no words, that's tacit. It's an unspoken sense of usually agreement. Usually you talk about tacit agreement, two people agreeing that they're going to do something, but they're agreeing without necessarily physically verbalizing it. But you get this little tacit dance under the skin. It's like each person testing the other person, and if you know your rights, and if you stand firmly and clearly and cleanly for them, these guys usually they've still got to make themselves right. They've still got to cover up their error, so they will still tend to try and make as minimal adjustments to their stance, if you like, as they feel they can get away with. And he keeps pushing to get a full, complete redress and change, and if he doesn't get it, he's satisfied with that, and there you go, they score low. That officer scored very low on that test, sort of thing. But sometimes I watch it and I think, well, you know, he's getting the guy going, he's trying to get a response out of the guy, but I think, well, that's the nature of what he's trying to, not so much trying to achieve, it's probably what he's trying to question. So what's going to happen? Hello, Mr. Officer. What's going to happen if I wind you up within the rights that I have? So, well, I might just use draconian force. What, even on camera? Even on camera against someone who knows what rights you do and don't have? Well, no, maybe not that, but I would still like to try and show my authority over you. And then he would be, you know, well, you don't have authority over me. Protect and serve, and that's the oath they take, and that's what you say that's what you're saying when you say, are you standing on your oath today, officer? In other words, you swore an oath that you would protect and serve. Is that what you're displaying right now? And you cause them to question, are you operating within your remit, within your duties, and duties of care and all the rest of it? And most of these officers don't want to reflect on that at that point in time, but they would normally realise that they potentially have a reasonable foe, if you like. But at the end of the day, the police, for me, I'm still, rightly or wrongly, I still have a certain amount of faith in them. But I do understand that any organisation, and this is the thing, any organisation needs to be, if you like, policed, watched, audited, inspected, to make sure they're staying within their purposes and their boundaries and all the rest of it. And that's always much better done. Well, you could say it's much better done internally if you can find that level of integrity, that level of honesty. But if not, you have outside independent organisations, don't you? And if an industry wants to go corrupt, they usually infiltrate the organisations that are there to regulate them. But without getting into any detail, there are one or two organisations on this earth whose mission is large enough, is big enough to require quite a lot of understanding and cleanness of hands, if you like, on the hands of anybody would try to make sure that they're staying within their realm. That can be a problem. it's a bit like, well, it's even a bit like what we've seen. In fact, these last few years with the lockdowns and this, that and the other, these things weren't lawful. But governments gave themselves the apparency that they had the right to just throw something into law overnight. I've marched in Europe against this sort of thing in the past. We went along with it, but you have a situation where you can be locked in your houses. I mean, seriously, anyone who wants to argue with me with whether or not that's right, I would urge you to go back 5 years and imagine being asked to believe it could happen in the United Kingdom, and each one of those people, I'm sure, would turn around and say, well, it never happened here, but it did. And just remember, those of you who are kind of like, well, it's only right, really. Just remember what your attitude would have been 3 or 4 years before. You had to be led to that viewpoint. Things have to be set up for that sort of response long before you propose it. You can say, right, we're going to ask people to stay in their homes. If they say no, we're going to want to force them to. How are we going to get them to agree to that? Well, we're going to spend a few days, months, years, weeks, whatever, leading them up to it. And usually it's the what used to be called and still should be called. The unlimited weapon is classic thing. It's all around you. It's invisible. You can't detect it. It's deadly. There's no cure, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's been used for centuries and centuries. So beware anything dressed up that way. The new deadly illness that you can't detect, and anyone can get it of any age, as we're all at risk. You never know. No matter what you do, it may still happen to you. And it's deadly, and there's nothing, whether you're talking about AIDS or whatever you're talking about, it always has to be, or whether you're talking about angry young Muslims or the commie under the bed, the communist under your bed, and how do you know your neighbour isn't an infiltrator of some sort, It's always that sort of thing, you can't detect it. It's all around you. There's nothing you can do about it. And unlimited weapon, and there probably aren't any. But with an illusion you can dress. There are people who say for every illness nature has a cure, and probably even for man-made ones. But anyway, so that's that. So when governments want to overreach, there's usually a PR campaign beforehand. It's like, oh, look at this Syrian. Oh, there's another Syrian. Oh, that was the Syrian who lived next door to you. That's 5 Syrians in a row now have all done something absolutely dastardly. We'd better do something about Syrians. What could that be? And then they roll out the handling, which was premeditated anyway. Let's go and wipe their cities out and nick their oil and call it humanitarian acts of bravery. But just, you don't even need to do your own research. Just think back, think of the things that would fall under the guise of the unlimited weapon. And next time you see the legacy media framing something in that reference, just know that there's already a plan. You're just being sold it. And that is true. You're being sold it. So there's no shame. I remember years ago quoting myself, I'd rather be the betrayed than the betrayer. I don't know, it's a difficult one, but probably, from a point of honour maybe. I mean, the betrayed is a victim, but victim of what? Victim of someone who is broken trust when it's been given. So there's no shame in that. There's no shame really in believing in the goodness of man and considering that those in positions of power sort of operate the same way mentally as you do. You know, I would never do this, so therefore they're not doing it. Well, it's not quite a good enough, sharp enough point of view to go up against these guys with. But at the same time, I'm not one of these people saying, oh, you're all sheep, because that's, you know, at the end of the day, can you imagine you cheat on your wife and all your mates down the pub laughing behind your wife's back at how stupid she is for not knowing? I mean, I just don't think that's right. So anyone who thinks that people are stupid for being misled over these last few years, they're not really, I don't think they're helping at all. Doesn't mean to say that you sit down and wait for people to come round to a way of thinking that's going to help. You know, you just get on with what you've got to get on with whatever you've got in your hand or in your hands, metaphorically speaking, of course. But to ridicule people that have been betrayed and misled is a little bit counterproductive, and it does the one thing that these governments work to do more than anything, which is divide and conquer. So to laugh at someone who's wearing a mask, to laugh at someone who's not wearing a mask, they both do the same thing. They put the mask wearer on the left and they put the non-mask wearer on the right. And all of a sudden, the 3 million pound or the 3 million strong renegade army is now 1.5 million strong and fighting each other. I mean, that's just the way you want your enemy, isn't it? Imagine, you know, take him in football terms on the pitch. You see your opposition fighting against each other to the point where 2 of their own players got sent off. You stand there thinking, are we going to actually have to? They'll probably put the ball in the net for us if it carries on like this. They'll probably score the goals for us at that point. So you do have to come together. You have to come together on something you can agree on. That takes communication, working out, well, what is real. So, well, I wouldn't go as far as to say as it's a big conspiracy, but I am in disagreement with the way the government are handling it. So, okay, there we go. Well, let's discuss that. We'll see what we can do about that. And I think if there was an attempt to do another lockdown, I think they would be met with. That's probably where these two sides, as they've been divided, would probably come together and say, I don't know if there is or isn't another wave, a 12th wave, and if we need to be 9 or 10 jabbed or whatever. But I remember those lockdowns, and I trust my government, but I didn't enjoy that, and I don't think it helped, and let's not do that again. So, you know, anyway, off I went. That was it really. That was my little thing. I accidentally pressed pause on this video. I'm going to have to stitch the two together if I want to upload them, just so there's continuity there. But anyway, I can't flip the camera around because that's iOS for you. It doesn't let you do that. And as I keep saying, oh, what does it? Don't think it does. No, it doesn't. As I keep saying, the inflexibility of software on computers, and the fact that you need to think like a robot in order to work one. And robots can't think, so that tells you why you're having trouble using your computer. That's being addressed by Exotech, which I am involved with, and we'll do some sort of a proper explanation of what it is. But if you want to just go and have a look for yourself, you can go to exotech.bm, exotech.bm, just have a look for yourself. But I'll explain at some point. I'll get to the end of these, well, this isn't a live, but this video recording, and sort of think, I'll keep thinking, I'll have to explain what that is at some point. Anyway, we're making great strides. We're on our way to bring physical universe technology into a better realm than it's in. And it couldn't come sooner because we've got a new terminology now, haven't we, in the last few years. We had big pharma, but now we've got big tech, you know, and we've seen it in the last few years. It's a very crude viewpoint or tool to use, but it might have some use, and that is, in these days, unfortunately, anybody who says they're doing good and aren't being attacked is either not effective or they're part of the problem. That's what I've found. I prefer to have a little bit more to my armoury than just that, but that's a starting ground. If I look at someone and think, oh, look at this knight in shining armour, and you look and you think, wow, he's achieved quite a lot, he's got a big footprint in this game, and you think, but he's not being attacked. It's like, then the jury's out at that point, because as cynical as it may sound, you just don't seem to get very far down the road doing anything useful or effective without getting X'd out of the game or pulled into somebody else's agenda. So I'm still not sure about Elon Musk, to be honest with you. I feel a bit bad, because I think if he's doing what he's supposed to be doing, then I'd want to be the first to thank him for that. But I just don't trust the fact that he's been apparently so disruptive of the guys who are giving us problems on this planet, and yet just doesn't seem to be getting attacked. I've been involved for a very long time with an organisation that, take it from me, has been making dents against where certain people were trying to lead humanity, and believe me, we got the scars to prove it. And I've just watched it. So it's not just that I've ended up in some sort of cynical space because of my own experiences. I'm still quite objective about it, and I look around, I think I can export that same thing to so many others. You look at the guys, Kennedy, Malcolm X, you know, it just, you know, it just, you know, Martin Luther King is another one. It just seems that if you truly start to pull humanity up by its bootstraps, or to try and rally people into doing that, you come under fire big time. And I just don't see that with Elon Musk. He's done all these things he's supposed to have done, and I look and I think, but he just isn't getting, you know, it just isn't getting attacked. And it almost works in reverse, where you see someone who's getting absolutely slaughtered. Very often I look and I think, you don't often get anybody that is 100% bad, you know what I mean? So anyway, so that would be my thing, is just any of what I've said. My advice would be always, people say do your research. Well, the research doesn't even have to be Googling it or DuckDuckGoing it or whatever. It could be just, you know, in a quiet little moment, just taking a look at some concept and just running it through your own track, your own little history, you know, your own, think, you know, let me see that, let's have a look in my past, see if that's been the case, and just see for yourself if you found these things to be true. And one thing that I've found is that, you know, the way you build a bridge is the same whatever language you speak. I mean, yes, there are different ways of building a bridge, but the point I'm trying to make is that for you to say, well, yeah, I've sort of noticed that in my little old life, but it wouldn't be true on the world stage. It's like, no, it's the same. He's just talking about on a larger scale. It's the same situation, it's just on a larger scale. So, you know, if you had one of those school teachers who always punished you if you questioned him, you were probably going right up against the edge of his own knowledge and understanding, and he wasn't going to have that. So you look at that and think, oh yeah, it's true actually, yeah. Especially now I know what I know, I look back and think he didn't really know what he was talking about on this subject or that subject. Fine. So why would that be any different if you're talking about an organisation or a government or whatever? It wouldn't be. But just look for yourself, just see in your own experience if anything that I've said holds true. Because the most important thing for me is a person's own reality, their own self-determinism, their own realizations. You know, I don't care how good a movement is. Blind followers are not really much use to anybody. They could drag a group down. You need people who can see for themselves, who've got their own understandings of why they're there and what they're doing and all the rest of it. That doesn't mean to say that you shouldn't do anything until you're an expert. I mean, because you'd never be an expert, would you? But I'm just saying that genuinely, it's not just a noble thing to say. Genuinely, I'm saying, see for yourself. Because it's great when you look over your shoulder and you realise that everyone around you knows the score, has seen it for themselves, and they've got their ownness to bring to the party, rather than just waiting for the Messiah to tell them what to do next. Good, bad, or indifferent. Messiahs, the only thing you can do by worshipping a Messiah is get him shot, which he probably doesn't want to have happen. So don't worship someone. Maintain your own understandings and put a shoulder to the wheel if you see that somebody's on the right path. Yeah, there we go. And that's your lot. Thank you very much. This was Ruislip Woods. I'm going to go back to the car now. Cheers. Thanks for joining. Bye.